Welcome to the WildOhio podcast. I am really excited about our guest today, but first I am here with my co-hosts,
Jordan Phillips,
John Kaufman,
and my boss, Jen Dennison.
Welcome, Jen.
Hey, Jen.
Thanks for having me.
Jen, you are the manager of the education and outreach section, and me. And we get to interview all about you today.
Oh, my goodness.
And your life and times at the Division of Wildlife.
I think we should start with the struggles, trials, and tribulations of having Abby as
absolutely
Yeah.
employee. I think that
3 times. She's been my boss 3 times.
This is our 6-part series. So
I'm a glutton for punishment. I've had her back here 3 times.
Yes. Starting in 2008, I was talking to my boss at the zoo, and I was like, I'm about to graduate. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing with myself. And she gave me your name, and she was like, well, why don't you talk to Jen Dennison? And so I sent her an email with my Hotmail account.
That shows some things.
That I still have. And I was like, hi, Mrs. Dennison. And then she was like, don't call me that.
That sounds about right. That sounds like Jen.
Jen, how did you start with us here at the division?
Oh, my gosh. How much time do we have? So I have almost 30 years in. I started in 1996. I was what's called a natural resources worker, which was a new position at the time. It was a permanent seasonal, if that makes any sense. They had to hire me back every year, essentially.
Yeah.
So I did that for 4 years, and then I got hired on in 2000 as the aquatic education coordinator. And the previous education coordinator retired at the end of 2000, and I took over his programs as well. So I did 2 jobs for about 2 years. And then when they asked me in about 2002 which one I wanted to stick with, I stayed with conservation education because my degree is in environmental education, interpretation, and communications from Ohio State with a minor in wildlife management. So that was a better fit for me. So I stayed in that position. I've been doing that ever since.
And so in that position, what are your job duties? What are your title that get you in charge of?
So I was the Project Wild coordinator until 2024 when I got this promotion. And now I'm the education and outreach manager. And so I oversee conservation education as well as wildlife outreach for adults, as well as the website and social media and marketing, of course, with Miss Abby. So lots of programs under me now.
So, like, if you were the public, how does the public see that manifest itself? Like in the county or in the field, where do they see what you guys are doing?
They'll see it in the classroom. They'll see it in informal educators with, your park naturalists, soil and water conservation district folks. But then also we have the WildOhio Harvest program. And then, of course, the website and social media. That's very public.
Oh, yeah.
And marketing as well. All of those are
marketing.
very,
That's Abby. You send
Abby.
all those emails.
Yeah.
Remind me to buy my stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, buy your stuff.
Yeah, perfect.
So most people who are familiar with the Division of Wildlife see us as the Fish and Game Agency.
Mm-hmm.
They don't necessarily know that there's like a whole other side of the Division of Wildlife where I would say you spend a lot of your time. Can you talk about what conservation education is, why it's important, who it's for?
John, do you remember any of this from the academy when I taught you in the academy?
I'm supposed to say something like, yes, of course I do. That was a while ago. I remember, for those who are listening, the wildlife officer portion of the academy is drinking from a fire hydrant. It's a lot of information in a short amount of time. We work a lot of education stuff. Now, we deal with more of the district level folks that answer to your section, not necessarily the central office. But I know you guys are like getting it all squared away for them.
Yeah. So conservation education, in my mind, it's the programs and outreach that we do to reach the people that don't hunt and fish. So there's a whole subset of the community and the population of the state that doesn't hunt and fish that we need to engage with as well to garner support for our agency, whether it's through voting for any kind of regulation changes or anything like that, or legislation that might impact our agency. We need that support. And so if they don't know who we are, then that's a problem. And so our outreach to the non-consumptive, for lack of a better word, portion of our state constituents is very important in that aspect.
Yeah, what's unique is that you're starting that advocacy at a young age, though, because you're integrating the Division of Wildlife and Conservation into elementary school grade curriculum?
Even
and
earlier,
outreach?
actually.
Is
We
it?
start in
Okay.
preschool as well. We have some preschool programming that we do, and the intention with preschool programming is to get those kiddos outside. The earlier that they spend time outside, the more comfortable they are. Then as they grow up being familiar with the outdoors and all that nature has to offer, whether it's wildlife or not, then they can, make good decisions towards the outdoors and responsible behavior towards the outdoors, whether they're hunting or fishing or not.
Right.
So what's nice about today is we've kind of got a 1-2 punch on this. So Jen, I think that we're in a unique opportunity for you to highlight some of these programs, but following you is going to be gentleman Jim Redding out of Granville Schools, who has a land lab, and we'll let Jim, I don't want to steal his thunder, but a lot of really good outreach there. Some of the programs that I'm familiar with that you guys have built out over the last couple of years, well, for a long time now, and it's just keeps growing. But tell us a little bit about the Wild School Sites.
So Wild School Sites is actually what we call an action extension of Project Wild. Project Wild is a supplemental curriculum. It's an international curriculum that was started by the Council for Environmental Education, and now the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies handles it. And it's a pre-K to 12 curriculum that focuses on wildlife and wildlife habitat, but it's integrated across the curriculum. So you're obviously teaching science, but you can also teach math, language arts, social studies, all those subjects across the curriculum. And with wildlife as a focus, it's inherently interesting to students. And so Wild School Sites is what we call an action extension of that. So the students and the teachers take what they learn from Project Wild and they apply it to creating wildlife habitat on the school grounds. And then they use those habitat improvement projects in their curriculum. Again.
And you were very instrumental in creating that. That was your baby? More or less?
Parts of it were my baby. So it predates me. It actually started in 94, so a couple years before I started. And our first we certify school sites as Wild School Sites. And our first one took place in 94, and it was Central Intermediate in Newark. Anybody want to guess now in 2025 how many certified sites we have?
No.
Everyone goes straight to John.
No idea. I would hope that number is huge. I mean, we have, I don't even know how many schools we have across the state of Ohio.
There's 600 school districts, roughly.
Okay, well, hopefully
Oh, my.
600. No. How many?
It would be nice if we could get them all certified.
Yeah.
We have about 216.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. And so the certification process is really easy, but leading up to it, I think it can be a little intimidating for some of the schools because they think they have to have these fantastic, amazing sites for kids to get out and do any manner of study of wildlife. And it really doesn't have to be that. We have some sites that are as small as just a bird feeding station. But then we have others like Jim Redding. Jim Redding has actually the largest, to my knowledge, school site in the state, which is 90 plus acres.
Does he know that, though?
Yes, he knows
It's
that.
yeah.
No
He's
trivia for him.
He's very familiar.
Yeah. Yeah, he knows that. And his was kind of a get for me. I generally let the district folks go out and do these certifications, but when I got convinced him to apply and get certified, I said, I'm doing that one.
Yeah.
I believe our most recent one was District 1 last week at the Wellington School.
Correct.
Here in Franklin County.
That is number 216.
Yes.
Awesome.
Do you have a memorable, what's your most memorable certification you were at?
So I certified one in Highland County. I think it was in 2007. It was one of those campuses. I believe it's Fairfield Local Schools. And it's one of those campuses where the elementary, middle, and high school are all on one campus.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had a big assembly, and there's 300, 400, several hundred kids in the gym. And I asked them, how many of you have participated in lessons out on the land lab? And a bunch of them raised their hands. And I said, how many of you participated and helped create the land lab, the outdoor classroom, Wild School Site? And not as many raised their hands. And then I said, how many of you want to go out into the land lab? And they all raised their hands. And that was really cool.
Yeah.
I guess my favorite, though, was my own high school. I got to certify that in 2018.
Really?
Yeah, that was
cool.
neat.
And what high school is that?
Kettering, Fairmont.
Okay.
And it's over by Dayton.
Yeah.
Aw.
And my parents got to come, and that was fun.
Oh,
awesome.
that's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
I think you were on maternity leave when I got to certify a site. It
Yep.
was St. Joseph's Montessori down towards downtown Columbus.
Mhm. Yeah.
And they had a huge school assembly. Like the whole class, all the classes came in, they sat down, they had a whole program about it. It was really cool.
So if I'm a superintendent listening to this, how do I go about getting the information on becoming certified?
So you can either reach out to us at 1-800-WILDLIFE and ask for your local office, your local district office, or ask for the wildlife education coordinator, and we can send you an application. Basically, to be certified, you have to show that you've created habitat on the school grounds, and then you have to show how you're going to use it in the curriculum. We also have small grants. We have $500 grants, flat $500 grants, and we have given away over 500 of those grants since 2004. That's the part that I started. I actually started that grant program. 566 grants, $500 each, and totaling about $283,000 we've given away for habitat improvement on school grounds.
So what can that 500 be used for? What do you usually see school districts using that for, like microscopes or?
So it was originally started to create habitat. So they will put in bluebird box trails, small ponds, pollinator gardens, those kinds of things. We recently, within the last 5 years or so, it was just prior to COVID, we expanded it to include in-classroom materials like what you're talking about with microscopes, field guides, trail cams, so they can do research out on the land lab and those kinds of things. And they can also use it for professional development for the teachers as long as it's related to native wildlife, or they can use it as field trip funding to get them to someplace to see native wildlife. But we want them to really kind of encourage them to create habitat on their school grounds as much as they can.
And it's not just schools, like
No.
daycares can be part of that.
Libraries are a big audience for us.
Okay.
Creating library or habitat on libraries, they use them within their summer reading programs. There's quite a few libraries that are.
I've been
have
poking
gotten
my
grants.
son's daycare about like their level of interest in doing something like that because they're in a neighborhood that's a pretty high densely populated area, but they have some space. I think they could do stuff, but
Well, if you're saying it doesn't have to be a lot of ground. If
Nope.
you're talking about a bird feeding station or creating a pollinator plot, I assume would be something you could do.
Absolutely.
Right? All that stuff can
Yep.
be done on really small parcels.
Yes, absolutely. And it's all important.
Yeah. So like the superintendent, you asked that question, Jordan. I would assume that some teachers or staff at the schools are like grabbing the bull by the horns and kind of taking charge of that. Like Jim's going to be that person there.
Yeah.
So like you got to find someone in the school who really wants to get motivated to do that.
Yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword for these projects because you do have often one super enthusiastic teacher, and that's great to have. But we also offer workshops and consultations because what happens when that one super enthusiastic teacher leaves?
Yeah.
Whether they retire, they switch districts or whatever. If the whole school is not invested in that project, then it unfortunately goes away. And so our workshops that we do with schools, we try to get them to involve as many teachers as possible. Sometimes it's really hard for the teacher to think about how to use the outside. And so our workshops focus on that, getting them to just step outside the door and see what they have and how do you best use it. So our consultations that we do are free, and we go to the school and we walk the property with them and we point out places that they could put a pollinator garden or a small pond and then how can you use it. And so we do offer that service as well.
Like I've just been thinking about this, and this affects kids, you're saying from pre-K, and especially if you have a campus where you have your elementary, middle school, high school, all utilizing the same grounds. It's not just for the high school students. It's not just for the middle school. So all these teachers at different levels can take kids out of the classroom and get them outside. And that's where, I mean, I don't have any quotes to studies, but there's so much beneficial for kids' mental health, for their physical health, for everything to get outside. And I mean, we are an outside agency.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
it's great.
And out of my section, the R3 section, we piggyback on a lot of what Jen does as well. So if they do create a pond or they have a pond and they get this and they start to get that awareness, we try and get them fishing poles. We try and stock that pond. We try and provide fishing opportunities for them, pond to table programming.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to get my consumptive side in there somehow, some way.
Well,
so.
and I guess it goes back to the beginning where Jen said we're trying to reach folks at different places who might not understand what the Ohio Division of Wildlife does for all Ohioans, right? We're not just benefiting deer hunters or turkey hunters, but everybody benefits when they get to see wildlife. So if they get to see that experience, especially at their school level, then they take that with them the rest of their life, hopefully.
And the
Yeah.
connections that they make in terms of how their behavior and their decision making impacts wildlife also impacts them. And so they need to see that and learn that
Right.
connection, that everything is connected. And the easiest way to do that is to get them to walk out the door.
Yeah.
So, transitioning a little bit, you also are overseeing a program called Backyards for Wildlife,
Mhm.
which sounds ish similar to Wild School Sites, but not quite.
Right. So Backyards for Wildlife was created back in the mid-90s, and it's kind of the private part of Wild School Sites. Wild School Sites was first, and then Backyards for Wildlife came along. And it's a way for a private landowner, whether they're in a very urban area and they have a quarter acre or less, or they're out in the country and they have a lot of acreage, we provide resources for them on how to do the same thing, basically create habitat on their property. And then how do you monitor it? How can you contribute to wildlife conservation through your projects? And that program's called Backyards for Wildlife, and we're getting ready to launch it again here by spring.
And it's right now, it's Backyards for Wildlife is a state level version of a national program too.
Yeah, the National Wildlife Federation has a similar program that's been around for a while. Ours is free, which is nice.
Yay!
And once they apply, they will get a certificate and a sign that they can post on their property.
Man.
Yes, my parents have one
sign.
in their yard.
I do. I'm gonna sign up, man. I need a sign.
Sign and caution tape.
Yeah.
Keep the little ones out of it.
Well,
Nature preserve. John's backyard nature preserve.
I do things on the edge of the property, the yard. Okay, so that's where I think. So you say backyard. I assume. Here's a question: do most folks who are participating in such a program live in urban areas or rural areas?
So it can be both. Again, it goes back to what I said earlier about the Wild School Sites program. It does not have a size requirement. Anything can be a Backyards for Wildlife as long as you're providing food, water, shelter, space to wildlife, and you're attracting them and you're watching them and you're providing good resources for them. That's all good.
So fall, right now, leaves are starting to come off. Can you give our listeners a couple different examples when you think of fall and you think Backyards for Wildlife, of some projects you've seen and just how simple that could be, and some of the studies that could come along with leaf litter or anything, that seasonally, a seasonal change. How can we provide habitat for backyards for wildlife?
So in the fall, I'm sure you've heard the expression leave the leaves. That's a very relatively new initiative where we're trying to convince people to not rake up their leaves unless they absolutely have to, because there's so many different insects in particular that utilize that leaf litter to overwinter. Small mammals get in there and they eat those insects, so you're providing a little bit of habitat in your yard by just not raking your leaves. And I know that's hard to get across to some people because they like those neat yards.
I have a question. So when you say not rake the leaves, let's say you have a yard and you have a tree or two, would you just leave the leaves lay naturally all over the yard like they were? Just, not pile them in an area, just leave them
can.
like a woods would.
Like if you have a woods along the edge of your property, you can just blow them into the into the woods. But I'll give you my yard. In the back, we don't rake.
Okay.
We don't blow the leaves. In the front, we do because it's front facing and we have an HOA and they don't like it.
The homeowner would have to do something like that possibly.
So we just bag up all the leaves and we put them in the compost pile, or we put them over my vegetable garden.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll rake mine into our garden just to throw it in there. And then my neighbor really likes a clean yard, so I feel a little bad about that, but I try not to mulch.
To each their own.
Another thing that you can do is when you have all of these pollinator plants, like all your sunflowers and all your big tall coneflowers and things like that, don't cut them down. Leave the dead stems up, which some people think is unsightly, but it's actually leaving the seeds for birds. And again, providing cover for a lot of those smaller animals. So less maintenance makes a good thing for your wildlife.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. So do you have an idea of the timeline on when all this might come out again as a refresh?
The refresh of the Backyards for Wildlife is going to launch in the spring.
Nice.
So will folks be able to
2026.
find that information on our website, you think?
Yeah, we are going to have a shortened URL. There's not much there right now, but
Yeah.
it's going to be ohiodnr.gov/backyards for wildlife.
And that'll have just documents and ideas for folks.
Yeah,
and just
there'll be a bunch of resources, how to plan, what are some different projects that you can do. It connects a lot of the resources that we already have, like our field guides, our attracting birds, attracting butterflies, milkweeds and monarchs brochures will be listed there as well.
What about like feeding? I know we're talking about planting, possibly coneflowers or something that stays up over. What about bird feeders? I mean, we talked about a little bit about with the wild school sites, but how does that play out? Do we have any advice for folks feeding over the winter?
One of the sections of the notebook that's getting created for Backyards for Wildlife that we're going to give away has a section in it about bird feeders and the different types. And the more variety of bird feeders that you put out and the variety of seed that you put out, the more likely you're going to get a wider variety of birds. So
Makes sense.
trays on the ground will feed doves, juncos, towhees. Hopper feeders that have sunflower seeds in them will feed a wide variety of species. Of course, hummingbird feeders, suet feeders, corn, all of those things attract a wide variety of species.
Yeah. I started bird feeder, but then it grows up. Then I have it in my flower bed. Well, my wife's flower bed, and then that's a problem.
That's
Thistle
how mine
feeders.
looks. It's in there somewhere.
Yeah.
I have to get a new type of feeder because I had one and then I watched a deer walk up and knock it down and eat everything. So I have to work on that.
They'll do that.
We battle squirrels.
Yeah. There is that. I'll throw that caution out there for folks. If you put a feeder out, it's going to encourage wildlife to come. You can have issues with squirrels. And in the spring, we often see skunks utilizing the seed that hits the ground. So they're coming in, and then people panic that they saw a skunk in the yard.
You can't necessarily choose the wildlife you attract.
Yeah.
Well, one
so
of the
there's-
things that upsets some people is they put out bird feeders and then a hawk comes in and
Yeah, and I
just
see
call
that
that
too.
advanced bird feeding.
Yeah. Well, that is a positive spin to put on it.
No,
Jen.
nature being nature.
Yeah.
It's next level.
But there are ways that we can, I have that complaint come from folks in town, but there's other ways you can feed undercover. So if you have certain bushes or trees, you can feed that under, especially for your like Junco feed, under your bushes so that they have that cover when they're eating. The hawks can't get to them. So there's ways to deter the hawks as well.
One of the things that we always tell the schools when they put in a feeding station is don't put it out in the wide open.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to use it.
Yeah.
You're
Put
right.
it near a tree, put it near a shrub. They like to take turns and go hide in that cover and take turns on the feeder.
That makes sense. Thank you so much for taking time with us today.
I'm excited for you to talk to Jim. He's one of my favorite teachers to work with, and he's done a phenomenal job at
He's a
Granville.
very enthusiastic person. I met him once when I went to visit his land lab.
Well, I haven't met him at all. So
Yeah.
first jab at it.
Yay.
Jen, if hopefully we have some educators listening, right? I hope that there are superintendents or teachers or maybe really excited parents or whatever. You said that they can go to our website, call 1-800-WILDLIFE. What would you tell them to encourage folks to reach out into the program of WildOhio school sites?
If they have any questions, our easiest thing to do is to email us at outdoor.education@dnr.ohio.gov.
You're going to have to say that again, I think.
outdoor.education@dnr.ohio.gov.
And so that email goes to your section? Yeah, comes directly to the educator
Yep.
folks and get you information.
Yep.
Awesome.
1-800-WILDLIFE as well.
Okay.
Yep.
And even if they don't want to do that, something that you've mentioned, and I think we've maybe talked about it in the past, but I want to highlight it, is you talked about the publications that we have and the field guides. So we have those as PDF online, and there's a plethora.
I think there's 18 now.
Yeah,
It's a
and
phenomenal resource.
they're awesome. They're
Stuff I didn't
Unique to
really
Ohio.
have.
So I know we talked about it when we
We have
talked about
spiders here.
the diversity conference, because that's where we debut the new field guide. But that's all on our website as well.
Correct.
There's a whole outdoor education, conservation education section that someone can just lose themselves in.
Yep.
And there's a lot of stuff in Ohio that I take for granted, didn't even realize was here until I start looking at those field guides with my kids. And I'm like, I had no idea that even existed in the state of Ohio. So
It's unique to Ohio, too. There's not very many other states that have that suite of field guides as well.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Oh, I was unaware. No, what was the one that was released this year? Shrubs? Was that this past year?
Small trees and shrubs.
Small trees and shrubs. And see, that one and the tree one I like a lot because I think often our consumptive users don't put two and two together about what's out there on the landscape and what maybe trees are beneficial and trees aren't beneficial.
if you want a hilarious read, we've got the wasp one where someone
Bees
took it
and
upon
wasps.
someone took it upon themselves to be stung by a majority of these, and they describe it as it's kind of like a wine menu. Like it's
Oh my gosh.
That's in our field guide.
it has a warm, unsettling sting to it.
Full bodied.
Yeah, it's a full body sting with a warm aftertaste.
Who did that?
I can't remember,
Man.
but it's absolutely hilarious.
I did not volunteer for that.
It's
It's
hilarious.
the same gentleman that I think took the time to estimate how hot peppers are. It's
Yeah.
kind of that same scale.
Negative. That's not
Nope.
for me.
We're going to
Not-
save that person for the video component so we
Yeah.
can just line them up.
I
Like-
avoid wasps and hornets like the plague. I don't want any of that business.
Right.
Jen, thanks again for coming.
Yep.
Glad to be here. Thanks
Good
for
to
having
see
me.
ya.
You guys too.
See you down in the office. Welcome back to the Wild Ohio podcast. We just finished with Jen Dennison of the Division of Wildlife. She talked a little bit about wild school sites, backyards for wildlife. She talked a little bit about our next guest, who is Jim Redding.
Welcome, Jim.
Welcome.
Nice to meet you, Jim.
Jim, you are
Thanks for
a
having me.
high school science teacher in Granville, correct?
Correct.
Go into more detail. How long have you been a teacher? What do you teach? How's it going so far this year?
Yeah, I teach for 36 years. This is my 36th year. I started out at Johnstown High School. I taught there for 4 years. I taught at Reynoldsburg for 1 year, and I've been at Granville ever since. I actually graduated from Granville, so it was kind of a homecoming for me, which was
cool.
a nice thing.
Oh, wow.
And then right now I'm teaching AP Environmental Science, an ecology course, teaching some biology, and then I also teach a class in sustainable agriculture over the summer.
Wow.
So did you grew up in Licking County then?
I moved here from Michigan in 6th grade.
Okay.
So I've been at Granville ever since graduated from there. And actually, a lot of my family still stays in Granville, lives in Granville. So, yeah, it's definitely home.
It's a beautiful, beautiful city.
Yeah, very much.
So you, as far as we know, are the largest wild school site in the state of Ohio.
Yeah, that's what Jen was saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, 90 acres. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Ish?
just maybe a little over 90 acres. We
Okay.
added it in 3 different sections as we went through. But, yeah, I think we're just shy of 100.
How did that all come to fruition? Like, where did you start with the idea, and how did it just explode from that idea to 90 acres with goats and sheep?
Yeah. So I teach AP Environmental Science, and when I started teaching that class, it was something I was very excited about teaching, but at the same time, it can be a very depressing sort of thing. You're talking about problems, and even when you talk about the solutions, I mean, they're a lot. They're not easy. So as we started into it, all of a sudden we had a situation where, my kids were great students, but they were kind of overwhelmed with everything. And when you get overwhelmed, you tend to kind of start like, okay, I can't do this. And then one day we just kind of part of a conversation started talking about, well, these solutions, maybe we could do some of them. And so they kind of called me out a little bit, and we started what we called take action projects. And from there, they came up with something that they wanted to tackle, something that they wanted to take on that they thought would make a difference. The Land Lab is one of those projects. So this was completely their idea, their passion, their, thought this would be good to go forward with. And, one of the things they have to do is they have to be able to fund them. So as they set up the plan for a land lab, and they were looking at about 4 or 5 acres, we figured, okay, that's what we could afford to fund. Early on in the process, I had a number, Brent Sodergren, he works for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Partners for Fish and Wildlife Program, and I reached out to him, and I talked to him for like 5 minutes at the Wildlife Diversity Conference, which, by the way, is a great place to network.
Yes, it
it's
is,
just
yeah.
phenomenal.
That was episode 2 of
Yeah.
our Wild Ohio
Oh, it's-
podcast.
And you take your students there. We've
We
seen
go-
you for the last couple of years bringing
Yeah.
students. So
Yeah, we've
thank
been
you for
there
that.
probably for 10,
Yeah.
15 years bringing students with me. But so anyways, he gave me his card at the conference. And so I handed it to a student. I said, go call this gentleman and see if he would come in and kind of offer us some advice on your plan as it is. He made arrangements to come out and see the kids the next week. So we all jumped on a bus, ran out to the site, which at the time was farmland that Granville owned, but we were leasing out. And so we went out and we walked the site, and the kids kind of ran on ahead of us, and Brent and I were walking back, behind them. And as we're walking, he's looking over the land. He says, this is really nice. You've got rolling hills, and you've got some potential for some water on the site, and pretty good weed suppression and all that. And he said, and he was commenting on it. And I said, well, we're not there yet. We're just over this hill where we want to do this. And he said, well, you own all this land, don't you? And I said, yeah, we do. He said, then why don't we do all of it? And I said, well, we don't have the money to do all of it. And that's when he kind of stopped in the middle of the field, looked at me and said, I thought I was paying for this. So by the time we got out to the site where the kids were, we were able to say, guys, we're not doing 5 acres, we're doing 43 acres.
And this was all land that the high school owned at the time?
High school owned. We were just leasing it out to a farmer at the time.
Wow.
Yeah. So then we went back to the drawing board and redid everything and, working with him side by side as far as, this makes sense, that makes sense, we'd have to do this, we'd have to do that. And then what we call phase 1 took place, and that was 43 acres. And then the next year we added another 27 acres. And then about 2 years later, we added another 37 acres. And then we added another 3 acres. So, yeah.
So in that first initial phase 1, the first 40 some acres, what were the plans that you guys had with it? Because the students drew it all up, right?
Right.
It was their ideas coming to life on the land. What
Right.
were some of those ideas?
So we had been talking a lot about agriculture. We had been talking a lot about biodiversity, and we were looking at ways in which we can kind of restore some of the land back into a more of a natural setting for to increase biodiversity. So one of the things that they had looked at was wetlands, and the whole farm field had been tiled, so there's lots of opportunities to create more wetlands by breaking tiles and bringing water back to the surface. But then we'd also talked about prairies, and while prairies wasn't a very dominant landscape in early Ohio, it was here, and it was valuable, and so we thought we could put in some prairies. And then this area hadn't had trees on it for 80 years, and so we thought we could bring back some of our. So combining those 3 things. So we have 4 wetlands on it. We have a restored stream. We have 2 vernal pools. We've planted probably, over 3,000 actual trees, with the root balls, and then another 2,000 of just bare root stuff. And then of all the, roughly 100 acres, we have probably 60 to 70 of them in prairie, tallgrass prairie.
And what year would this all start?
It started back in, I'm going to say 2009 would have been the idea. That's right. It'd be about 2013.
Okay.
And then we actually didn't start putting trees in because that was one class coming up with the idea. And then we call them legacy projects now, but the work happened after that. That would have been like 2014, 2015.
That's awesome.
So we just finished our first 10 years of the contract with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Partners for Fish and Wildlife, and then we've signed back up for another 10 years.
It's quite the space. So, Jim, you know this, but I'm in Granville as well. I've got my kids going to Granville schools. So the intermediate school is where this is located, and it kind of surrounds the intermediate school. But I can't tell you how many people just within the community and knowing what I do, and as I am trying to talk about conservation services and practices that they can use on their land for conservation for tomorrow, I am always sending people up to the land lab in the intermediate school because there are 4 different ecosystems that they can real time take a look at. Another beneficial thing for it, spring break. When I hear spring break, I think either I'm in Florida with family or I'm at the land lab helping Brent and Granville Fire try and burn one of the fields.
Oh, really? They do?
For mid-contract. Yeah, it's not even mid-contract, but it's basically disturbance. Mm-hmm. So there's all the different phases of what goes into a prairie right there for you to see. Don't even have to leave your car on pavement. And it's like driving through Disney World for a naturalist.
For conservation.
Because you can see all of it. And you guys are doing trap surveys. You're doing camera surveys. Talk a little bit about some of the cool stuff that the kids are getting excited about that they're seeing on some of these camera trap surveys.
Yeah, so as a science teacher, one of the greatest benefits that I see in the land lab, and I would say this to any school that is considering something like this, that it's a lab. I mean, it's so like normally as a science teacher, you give the kid a lab, you give them canned data, they work through the data, they come up and say, is this the right answer? And you say, no, it should be a little bit higher. They go back and rework their data. That's not real science. So when we're doing experiments out in the land lab, we can set something up and it can be a 5-year, 7-year, 15-year experiment. So my students are using data that was collected 8-9 years ago, and they're seeing how trends are happening, how things are changing, how the macroinvertebrates in the pond are shifting.
Yeah.
So they're doing real stuff out there, And I think it creates a much more of a, for them, an engagement because they realize that this is science. This isn't something
This is what it looks like.
Yeah, they're not going to do it and then throw it in a trash can on the way out the door, that this data means something. And so that's been a real powerful experience, I think, for those students. And we've done trail cams, we've done surveys, and we work hand in hand with Dennison University, which is a perfect situation for us. They're just up the hill. There's several professors that have been involved in the land lab from the very beginning. So they can give us protocols that are going to work. They can kind of give us ideas. Sometimes they'll take on a project and then we'll take on a part of that project that can add to theirs. So as a result of it, my students have gotten 2 published papers out of research that they've done in the land lab, and continue to be a part of other research that's continuing in the land lab through Dennison University.
And I don't feel like you're giving yourself enough credit here because Jen kind of teed it up for you, but you had a great connection. You've got great partnership with Dennison University, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service with Brent. But it took us a while to get the kids convinced to do a wild school site, but they finally did a wild school site, and Jen was very excited about being able to be there and present that. But as we
believe
understand
she said
it,
that she had to badger you to be a wild school site for a few years.
As we understand it, this is just this was built out because of your passion to teach the next generation the sciences, the AP sciences. You put it into the kids' hands. But one of the things we wanted to convey is that you don't have to have 90 acres to be able to facilitate a lot of what it is that we're discussing with these wild school sites. But what you do have to have is a little bit of drive. So you are willing to meet the kids halfway, which I think is very important. So if you're a teacher or you're a superintendent listening to this, just starting that initial spark might be all that's needed to build out. Next thing you know, 90 acres collaboration with multiple agencies, and you guys did a YouTube video that is phenomenal. Legacy of something.
I think of a land lab. So yeah.
Legacy of a land lab on YouTube, and there's a bunch of kids. I mean, they're raising bees. It's all across the board. So I think that speaks volumes.
Yeah, I mean, I've had an opportunity to talk about the land lab and even our sustainable garden, which is at the high school, and pretty impressive as well. But it really is. I mean, I got into this job. I wanted to be a wolf biologist. I mean, that's my first degree is in wildlife management, natural resource management. I came to teaching because of a conversation I actually had with my dad right before he passed away. But the idea was that I've always been passionate about these things. I've always been passionate about nature. I was always I was that feral kid that was in the woods all the time.
Yeah.
But if you're going to save that stuff, you have to get people to feel the same way you do. That's what got me to teaching. And I also realized that, this generation, there is a disconnect from the natural world. Yeah. I mean, a lot of times their appreciation of is, the box set of planet Earth. I mean, that's how they know it. So when we started talking to these kids, and I have amazing kids, students, but when we started talking to them, all of a sudden they're like, okay, we're interested. And then they really ran with it. I mean, we're doing things that are way beyond anything that I ever imagined or ever thought of. My role has kind of been the storyteller, where when a new class comes in, I say, okay, here's what the students did before you, and then they jump and they go.
You're setting that bar, right?
I think that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's that competitive bar, and it's
yeah.
being set. So that being said, I've got to ask, because again, I pass them on a regular basis. You got to explain the goats to me. You've got a pen with some goats in there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm surrounded by prairies. I'm surrounded by oak regenerational plantings, and then there's 4 or 5 goats on a picnic table. What?
Yeah.
What was the thought process there?
So again, we kind of refer to these as legacy projects, and so our responsibility is to keep them running, but then the students want to add their own little piece to it as we go. So one of the initial conversations we had and they had to pitch this idea to the school board. I mean, they had to get it approved, and so one of the initial, I guess, pushbacks was that this is farmland. Farmland is important in Ohio. We don't want to lose our, that farming roots and all that. And so the students said, we understand that we have to grow food. We understand that that's necessary, but we want to see if we can do it in a different way.
Okay.
So phase 3, the agroforestry is, we have beehives, we tap maple syrup, we have native fruit trees, we have cultivated fruit trees, we have a 3-sister garden. And the idea of the goats was to put them in and around our fruit trees and then use them as a way to kind of maintain the growth of the plants,
okay.
the weeds, that kind of stuff,
Yeah,
and the invasive species, but then also to add nutrients back to the soil.
Nature's lawnmower.
And rebuild it. Exactly.
Yeah.
So when the students got that idea, they ran with it. They funded the whole thing through grants and donations, and they were the ones that put up the fence. They drove up to Toledo to get the goats. I mean, it was all them. Turns out goats and fruit trees don't actually match up very well. So we've lost.
Good to know.
Lost a lot of fruit trees.
Yeah, we've lost some of our fruit trees.
I think they would disagree.
So we are in the process of figuring out a better way to protect our trees. But then we're also now, if anybody's out there, we're looking for hair sheep.
Okay.
So we don't have to shear them, but we were trying to get a couple sheep that we can put in with the fruit trees to keep the grass down, so we don't have to mow it as often. And then we're also looking for the portable electric fence, so we can start moving the goats out into the land lab to control invasive species.
Call for action, listeners.
Yeah.
I imagine with something like this at a school property, you garner a lot of community support. Do you guys do fundraisers throughout the year to help support it? How can Jordan help out at the land lab?
Yeah, so the kids have gotten very good at writing grants. So we do a lot of that, but they also, like for example, we have an observational deck that looks out over the land lab that was a pricey thing. And that was one of those when the kids came up with the idea, I'm like, that money-wise, we're not going to be able to make that happen because we can't have a classroom of people out on an observational deck that was built by our shop class. I mean, it's, they do good work, but, liability-wise. So they actually started cold calling builders and just went around the community and no. And then all of a sudden, one of our local builders said, meet me for coffee. So the kids that got out of my class, they ran down to the coffee shop, sketched out a few things, and came back and said, the builder's on board. He'll donate the labor. So then it was a matter of getting the materials. And we reached out, like ODNR actually gave a grant for the materials along with a couple other organizations, and we were able to fund it.
Yep.
So, we do a lot of that. But the community is very supportive of what's going on at the land lab and the garden. So I have people all the time saying, hey, I have $200. Who do I give this to? So we have a fund that allows us to maintain and keep adding on and building on the projects that we have going out there. And then, it's just a matter of, we do fundraisers here and there. The goats are eating more than we thought money-wise. So there's always going to be some things that you need to figure out a more creative way to go get money.
If you're sending kids down to the coffee shop, I feel like you're getting a lot of life skills out of that, like pitching and
cold calling people.
Grant
You
writing.
don't do that.
Yeah. No, and they're good at it. I mean, they prepare. They're using my classroom to figure out. Okay, here's their pitch. Here's how they're going to sell this. They talk about return on investment. I mean, they do it in a very professional way when they go into these meetings. And they've been successful. And then, that kind of builds off of it.
Well,
Now
we're
we're
out
in
of the
business
science
planning.
realm, but, again, it speaks volumes to being outside, connecting with something that is outside, and then connecting with something that you can put your hands on, build, and then observe and see those changes. And I think that's a huge part of how you get that buy-in, is you look at those reports 8 years ago from that puddle that was there. And now all of a sudden you've got teal and wood duck in it and a mink on your camera set. And it's like, this is coming. This is evolving. This is becoming something here.
Yeah.
It's public access? Do you allow folks to come and take looks, or do you guys do tours, or how's it work?
No, it's open to the public. Anytime you want to go.
Right?
We have probably, 2.5 miles of mowed trails.
I was going to say, there's walking
so
trails
they can come
and
out
everything.
and walk around and see it. I mean, and we don't even we don't have signs up about like dusk and dawn, that kind of stuff. So it's pretty much open. And one of the, I guess, interesting things to me on a side note of all of this is that when you have something like this, you're always worried about, is somebody going to mistreat it? I think the real trick here is that the kids created it. It's theirs. They own it, and they fully embrace that. And they take care of their own stuff.
Yeah.
So, we really haven't had any issues whatsoever about, any sort of vandalism within it. And the community, I think, feels the same way because it's not, it's not locked. They feel like they can go in and they just use it the way it's supposed to be used.
Yeah.
So how many students do you think you've put through in the years there at the Land Lab since 2013 who really invested their time and their education there.
I teach like about 120 kids.
Really?
So, I mean, and all of them at some point have some connection into the land lab.
Awesome.
We have, we do a lot of like mentoring type stuff. So we'll meet actually with first graders, second graders, third graders in the land lab. A lot of times you have teachers that, they want to get their kids outside, but they don't, unfortunately, teachers feel they have to have all the answers. If you're not familiar with the land lab or any place outside, you go outside, you don't have answers. That's a scary thing. So what I do is my seniors, juniors will come out with you. They're the ones that will walk the kids through the land lab. You're just there for, make sure nobody has a meltdown or anything.
Yeah.
And, that takes away the fear of that teacher walking through that space. So and then you've got juniors and seniors walking around with kindergartners and showing them this and showing them that.
Now
And
turn around and educating others.
Yeah, absolutely. I now have kids coming into my building that were involved in those tours as, first and second and third graders. And now they're leading the tours.
Now they get to be excited about that,
Yeah.
be the kid who was there.
That's cool.
An amazing
That's
program.
a good circle.
How about in the future, you got folks who've turned out to be naturalists, turn into wildlife professionals, conservation professionals?
Yeah. And when I first started teaching AP Environmental Science, I had 20 kids, 25 kids. It's an AP course. We were as high as having 4 classes of it. And so, it definitely grew when the kids realized this is something I'm going to get to where I'm going to get to do something. But one of the things that I've kind of kept track of is how many of my students then go on to a career in this field. And again, going back to Wildlife Diversity Conference, it's amazing how many I see that are now walking around in shirts that, are professionals. And it's just such a neat experience to see that. And then even have those kids come back, those adults come back and talk to my students and say, if you want to do this, you can get there through here.
So how do you play that out through the Ohio school sites, or the wild school sites? How do we partner with you and what you get going out there?
We just stole all the thunder.
We did?
No,
we didn't know.
No, but
No,
Doesn't sound like we did anything. It sounds like these guys
what
are
I'm
knocking
saying,
out of the
right.
park.
Well,
Yeah.
Jen mentioned in her segment that, educators come in different stages. So
Yeah.
you had already gone way over here with your land lab, and then some other teachers are like, well, I have this small patch of land I was thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think, one of the things when we first put in the land lab, and our superintendent, Jeff Brown, has been incredibly supportive through this entire process. In fact, his daughter was one who came into my class. She was going to go be a mathematician. I mean, she was really good in math. That's where she was headed. She's now in the environmental field. So she changed gears. And I think he saw the impact that had. And as a result, he's been even more supportive of what we're doing out there. But when the students were pitching this idea to the school board, he opened it by saying, yes, we're giving up money that we get from the tenant farmer that's leasing the land. He goes, but the amount of money we're giving up, I can't buy a classroom for that. And we really do look at this as a classroom. Now it's a 90 plus acre classroom, but if you got 3 acres, if you got a fourth of an acre, it's still an opportunity for students to go out and do something on the land that is actually significant. They, anytime you start to make changes, anytime you add, I'm going to plant this plant and that plant, there's data to be collected there. There's something to learn. And, every little site adds to the mosaic that becomes this large conservational movement that we're seeing happening in backyards all over the place. That's all positive. So I think the Wild School site is an amazing program because it really encourages the outdoor space to become a classroom. And then through things like, Project Wild and that sort of stuff, you have the tools to take the kids out and do it, even if you don't have a background in these areas.
Awesome. What specifically are you guys doing right now? What projects? Because you said something about camera traps, right? So what projects are you guys running? What science are you doing right now?
So a couple things that we have going out there. We just got another set. Through a grant, we were just able to purchase more camera traps. So we're going back in this year, and we did a survey. We do it every about 4 or 5 years of what's out there. So now we're up to our next survey, and we'll go ahead and look at what's moving around in the landscape. There were things like you mentioned the mink, where we thought we had a mink out there. We had made a really good confirmation of it, caught it on a camera trap. It actually had a bullfrog in its mouth. Turns out
that's cool.
That's only been caught on film twice.
Oh,
Ours
really?
is the second one. That was one of our papers. So, those kind of neat opportunities. Right now, we're also doing some study with ticks and Lyme disease. So I'm working with the advanced biology teacher, Jen Newell, who is kind of heading up that program, and Mara Hoover, who's another biology teacher at the high school. And we're actually going out and dragging for ticks, and then they're taking the tick and breaking it down and extracting the DNA. And through the DNA, we can see if there's Lyme disease in the tick.
Really?
So we can look at how many ticks we have, what types of ticks we have, and if they're actually carrying Lyme disease in our population
like
out
prevalence for Lyme disease in the tick population.
And then part of that is also the communication to the community, communication to the teachers, because there was a little bit of concern about taking kids out there and exposing them to that sort of risk. So we're showing them that the risk is minimal. Based on our study, we're seeing dog ticks instead of deer ticks, those sort of things, and just communicating in general on how to be in an outdoor space and be safe in an outdoor space. Because we don't want kids to be inside,
or afraid to be outside,
or afraid, we're worried to take them outside, but we're okay setting them in front of a computer for 7 hours a day.
Have you had any students present at our Student Wildlife Research Symposium?
Yeah, we've had several students present their research there. We had one, we did the maple syrup tapping, so they talked about that. We've had nutrients influxation into the wetlands. They talked about that one. My daughter and a student with her did eelgrass. They were propagating eelgrass to try to reintroduce it into the space. So we've had several people talk, and we'll continue to do that. That's an amazing opportunity for students to share their research. And then there's this ongoing snake study. So we have snake boards through the whole thing. We're looking at, we've done macroinvertebrate sampling along with Dennison through all the wetlands, so all 4 of the wetlands. So we have 12 years of data on how the macroinvertebrates have changed from year to year. So the AP Environmental Science looks at that from the Shannon Diversity Index perspective and using real data.
That's awesome.
Have you found, just pick that macro one apart, have you found that it's improving the wetland, the habitat?
Yeah, what's interesting is it's really transitioned. So we've gone through different different groups of organisms that have been in there and kind of ebbs and flows in terms of which ones are dominant, which ones aren't. And that's kind of an interesting, okay, why? How did this go up? Why is this coming back down? Those sort of things. But one of the things that's been really telling is we have one wetland that is completely, the entire watershed sits within the land lab. The other 3, water comes from an outside source. And we see a much higher nutrient load, much more of an alga growth in those wetlands that we do. The one that sits completely within the prairie has very little algae, if any, at all, which is kind of an interesting, but kids can see that firsthand.
Yeah.
They can measure that.
Yeah, we were at Farm Science Review with John Kaiser talking about the benefits of some of these native pollinator plots, warm season grasses, water quality, and the H2Ohio projects, the CREP projects, and that speaks volumes right there to the natural filtration of nutrients into a water source, and right there you have it. Yeah. So.
Well, and then all those kids take that information with them forever. They know that, hey, if we have a healthy ecosystem, a healthy habitat, it benefits us as well. That's awesome.
I mean, you could talk about that on a chalkboard, but when they're actually walking around in the wetland and they experience it firsthand, that makes a lifelong
sticks in your brain
lesson.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Any interesting species of snakes, out of curiosity?
Snake-wise, we haven't seen a whole lot. We've got water snakes out there. We've got garter snakes out there. We've had a few little ringneck snakes out there. So we haven't had a huge population of snakes. Turtle population, Dennison's been monitoring that now for the last 4 years, and that's interesting just in the sheer number of turtles we have out there.
That make it to their way to the middle of I mean, it's essentially the middle of ag fields where this is. Yeah. So, yeah.
If you build it.
Yeah, absolutely. We have like 176 different species of birds now, which is
That's
it's one of the birding hotspots, the e-birding hotspots in Lincoln County. So we're right up there with like Dawes and the fish hatchery in terms of number of birds.
Backpedal to snakes. You said snake boards. Tell me about that.
So, and that's something that would be really easy for anybody to put around any schoolyard. But ours are 2 foot by 2 foot. And
is it tin?
Ours, we use wood, so these are just wood.
Okay.
And what we did is we actually gridded out the land lab, so we have metal posts that we marked with GPS that we know exactly where they are, and then we put a board at 3 of the 4, north, south, east, and west of each one of those, depending on where trails were and stuff. And then during the year, we go out and we turn the boards over in the morning. The snake cuddles underneath there at night just because it's warmer, and then you flip them and you catch what you have. And then we were able to recapture, and monitor the number of snakes and how long they've been there and how they're growing throughout the land lab.
That's awesome.
That was started as one of my students, and actually he presented at the Student Research Symposium, and then his dad and mom are both teachers at Dennison. So once he graduated, they took over that project, and they've been running it ever since, but they invite my students to come back out and continue to be a part of the collection of the data.
That's cool. I wonder what they talk about at dinner.
Well,
Yeah, they're all herpetologists. So
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
exactly what they're talking about.
yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, I'm enamored. I think it's great.
Yeah.
Can you imagine having that growing up?
Well,
like
and-
just anything
Right?
like that.
We had a little bit in our high school. We had Little Miami, which is a scenic
Okay,
river,
yeah,
and
yeah.
my high school biology teacher, through our honors biology class, every year you'd go down there and you do macro sampling, and we had years of data on macro sampling at these sites. So I had not as in depth as that. That's amazing. I wish I had more of that, because you get to leave class and you get to go down to
Right.
the river and mess around. So, but you were invested, and you knew kids who maybe had gone through that class years before, and then you knew that kids were going to take it after you, and it was cool. It was a legacy. I like that you call it legacy.
Our
That's great
rival
work.
high school had a very small version of a land lab, Westerville North.
Yeah.
And so our class we'd bus there for, different projects, homework, stuff
Yeah.
like that. But then we had Boyer Nature Preserve nearby too. We had stuff nearby, but nothing on the scale of what you guys have,
Yeah.
which is amazing.
Well, I should probably mention this. So my wife graduated from Westerville North, and as soon as I started teaching, she started talking about the land lab they had at Westerville North. So she had put that seed in my head a long time ago before we got to it. Now I think we've surpassed what they have
Yes.
out there now, but it definitely was kind of like, that's a cool idea.
a good
if I ever
spark.
get a chance, I want to do something like that.
Well, to jump right off of that, Jim, I hope that there are teachers listening, or staff, or excited members of faculty that hear this and do exactly that, because that would be awesome. I mean, what would you encourage folks if they're getting started? I mean, it had to be daunting at some point. You put a lot of that on the students. Students really took a hold of it, but what could you give? Any advice to folks?
Yeah. So one of the things that we push pretty hard with our students is to take risks, to not be afraid to fail, right? This was definitely one of those things. As a teacher, I had no idea going in, and if it wasn't from the guidance of Brent Sodergren, it would have been absolutely overwhelming. But we tell our kids to take a shot. So I'd say the same thing to teachers out there. From a science perspective, science is failing is part of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's you get good results, you get bad results, and everything teaches you something. So we've just approached it from that perspective. We're going to try it. If it doesn't work, we'll rethink it and retry it and just keep going on. So I would encourage you to do that. And we've had a very supportive administration that has understood that process, and that not everything we're going to try is actually going to work. We had a superintendent that allows us to burn it, and you're sitting there looking at a fire racing across the field towards your school. That's a little nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
Been there for it.
Yeah.
It's a little nerve-wracking for everyone
do
involved.
the students, not to get us off track, do students participate in the control burn?
It's during spring break, purposely.
Yeah.
But
And
I'll let you answer.
They
Yeah,
come
go
out
ahead.
and watch. I mean, the whole
Yeah.
community comes out and watches.
Yeah.
And, it's one of those things where it's a phenomenal learning experience, because all we know about fire is that it's bad.
Yeah.
Right.
And
What
so
we're taught.
the fact that it can be a tool on land like that is something that I think students need to recognize. My son, who's been involved in this for quite some time, he was 3 years old when we built the land lab. The first time we said we were going to burn it, he was very upset about that. He loved this place. How are you going to burn it? He's the one out there now walking back and forth, talking to community members about the value and importance of what we're doing. So I think it's a great lesson from that regard. And I'd also say to any teacher out there, I have students, because the class has gotten bigger, I have students that aren't going to go into an environmental field. They're writers, they like music, that kind of stuff. You can do anything in a land lab. One of my students put together an original piece of music that was absolutely amazing, and all he did was go out with equipment and record sounds in the land lab.
Oh, really?
And then he arranged them in a way, and then he played his violin or whatever over top of it. And it was incredible. But that was his passion, was music. So he tied it back to the land, tied it back to the land lab, and was able to still get an appreciation for what we created.
Yeah, I was gonna say, even if you don't go into the field, you've been exposed to it, you have an appreciation, you know why it's important, and that can carry on too.
Yeah, it's just that little, as you make decisions later in life, that little voice in the back of your head that says, land and how we treat it matters.
Cause and effect and advocacy for wise land management and use. I mean, that's simple, but it's also that complicated.
Thank you.
I'm looking at John. John's got all this stuff spinning through his head.
I know he has
still.
so many questions.
I think it's great. It makes me think about my high school biology teacher, and that's why half the reason I'm here. So, I think you're doing great work.
Yeah.
Anyone listening, I can't encourage you enough. It's located in Granville. It's at the Granville Intermediate School, GIS, and there's parking on both sides. As Jim mentioned, there is some walking trails throughout, but you don't have to get out of your vehicle to appreciate a lot of what's there as well. It's a paved road. You can drive right through. You
Say hi
can
to
see
the
a bunch
goats.
of different ecosystems. You can say hi to the goats.
We need sheep.
Yeah.
We're looking for sheep. So I thought I was going to help you out with that, but my daughter told me yesterday that she dissected a sheep brain 2 days ago. So I think that one's not going to do you any good on the grade. I think we've already passed over with that one's opportunity to help you. So, well, thanks for coming in today.
No problem. Thanks for inviting
talking
me.
about it. Yeah, and thanks for everything you're doing in the community and with the school. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed our talk with Jen Dennison and Jim Redding. Don't forget to subscribe to the Wild Ohio podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Tell your friends, tell your family, and in the meantime, we hope to see you outside at Granville.